Hi, my name is Mark Ryan. I'm Director of Emerging Technology Solutions at Zscaler. And at our Zscaler Cloud Summit, Zenith Live, that we just had in Las Vegas, we demonstrated how to secure partner access to your applications without the need for VPN using the Zscaler Private Access service. So I'd like to very quickly run through the demonstration that we did there. So the premise of this is that we're going to give access to applications without the need to install a client. This is all done through our browser-based access service. So in this example, I've got an Apache web server running in AWS. It's also running in my data center. And so what's going to happen is the user is going to access the Apache web server. It's going to resolve to the Zscaler cloud. And we're going to use the Zscaler private access service to connect the user to the application. As I said, the Apache server is going to resolve to this function. We call it the exporter. And the client is going to make a TLS connection to the exporter. The exporter is going to challenge the user for authentication first. So we support SAML authentication. And what that means is the user is going to be redirected to the SAML identity provider where they'll be challenged. They'll log in, and the response will then be consumed by Zscaler. The exporter function will evaluate the SAML response and decide whether or not the user should have permission to this web application. We're then going to use the Zscaler tunnels to connect the user to the application, and the connections from the Zscaler connectors, which are installed in a data center or AWS, are used as outbound connections to stitch the user request together in the Zscaler cloud. What I'm then going to do is I'm also going to advertise, and I'm going to access an application in my data center. This is a Guacamole server, and the Guacamole server is an appliance that's running on top of a standard Linux virtual machine in my data center, but it's doing a couple of things for me. Obviously, this isn't a service that's offered by Zscaler, but what I'm demonstrating here is that the Guacamole server can be a standard HTTP, HTTPS, HTML5 application that's going to give me a couple of functions to other servers in my data center. So what I'll do then is I'll log into the Guacamole server, and I'll use the Guacamole server to give me SSH and RDP access to servers in the data center. So let's go ahead and demonstrate this. So I'll come out of my PowerPoint. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to launch Firefox, and I'm going to log into my my Apache server. So my Apache server is going to redirect me to my ADFS server, and this is the function that's done by the exporter on Zscaler Private Access. So I'm going to log in here using X509 certificates. I think it's a lot more secure. This is an internal certificate that's being used on my SAML server, and this will get consumed back by the Zscaler Private Access service and grant the user access to the private web server. Now this is actually running in my physical data center. What I'm now going to do is I'm actually going to change my URL. I'm going to go to my Guacamole server, which again is advertised via private access. Now I've already signed in, so my SAML assertion is already valid, and so the Zscaler private access service has consumed that already. I already have an active session, and so now it's giving me access to the Guacamole server. So I can log in here. My username is mryan. I'm not going to tell you my password. I don't want to save that. And I've got a couple of things going on. So I can access, for example, my ADFS server. It's advertised over HTML5, and it gives me access straight in via an HTML5 interface. And thus I'm able to use my Guacamole server to give me RDP access to a server running in my data center. And we can see here this very responsive service. And I can go on and I can access any of my administrative tools on the server and browse the network service or anything like that. So let's come out of this, and actually let's go back into the home page of my Guacamole server and do something else. I can access my CentOS server over SSH. Now the CentOS server is where my Apache server is running. So let me just go ahead and do something really naughty, like log in here as root, because I really shouldn't be advertising that. But as you can see, my CentOS server is doing a couple of things. It's actually where I'm running my Guacamole server on one port, but I'm also running that Apache web server there locally. So if I go ahead and stop my HTTP server, my Guacamole still carries on running. It's running on a different port, and Zscaler Private Access is advertising that out to the internet. So I've still got access to that. But if I open up a new tab and I go back to my Apache server, obviously it's failed now in my data center, and Zscaler Private Access has now moved that across to the AWS service. So my application, the web application, apache.wellskeet.net, was available in two places. Zscaler Private Access worked out where it was running. It started off in my data center. It then failed over when I stopped the HTTP server, and you can see now that it's running back in my data center in my VPC in AWS. So it's my Apache server was running here, and when it shut down, it's now running over here. So, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.